Very good afternoon and welcome to our policy dialogue and launch of a new EPC publication called Building a Circular Economy, the Role of Information Transfer. I'm Annika Hedberg. I'm Head of Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program at EPC and will be moderating today's discussion, which is kindly supported by Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications. We've been at EPC working already for several years on looking at how digitalization can support the green transition, help address our sustainability challenges. And we've been especially interested in the possibilities that digitalization, better use of data, and digital solutions can provide for a circular economy. And in this context, we are very excited to focus today in one area that is particularly interesting and timely, which is the role of information transfer in circular economy. There's clearly a strong rationale for Europeans to rethink what and how we produce and consume. If we can maintain the value of products and materials for as long as possible and minimize resource use and waste by increasing repair, recovery, reuse, and recycling of materials and products, this can help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It can allow us control materials better, generate more value from their use, and it can allow us to become less dependent on major raw material exporters. Moreover, this transition to a circular economy can create new jobs, increase demand for new products, services, and can bring significant economic benefits and opportunities. So the rationale is given, but there is one major barrier to achieving a circular economy. It's often that information does not travel with products and materials between stakeholders and across the value chains. So this means that it's not always transparent how materials have been sourced or what actually is in the products that we use and discard. And it's this lack of transparency that makes it very difficult for producers to design more circular products, for consumers to handle products in a more circular way and dispose of them properly. And it makes it very difficult for waste operators to repair or recycle them. So this is where data and digital solutions can offer interesting prospects, as they can enable this kind of information transfer. You'll hear today about various solutions that are already in use for this aim, and we'll of course talk also about the prospects for solutions like digital product passports that could help make information transfer much faster and efficient in the future. So now, while our work focused on digitalization as an enabler for circular economy, I should stress that there are, of course, caveats to digitalization that can't be ignored. Digitalization does come with a significant climate and environmental footprint, which means that digitalization can only become a real driver for sustainability if also the digital transition itself becomes sustainable. And I'm sure that I will also be touching upon this issue today. We are joined today by a great group of speakers and will discuss the challenges and prospects for using data and digital solutions to enable information transfer and create a circular economy, as well as the policy framework, which is needed at EU level if we are to go forward. And in this context, we certainly will be discussing the role for European common data space, as well as for the role for digital product passports. On the practical side, we obviously are very happy to hear also from our audience in the course of the event. And if you're interested to ask questions, please, you can click on the hand icon if you wish to speak, or alternatively, you can use the space provided to ask short written questions. I'll hand over first to Stefan Sipka, who is a policy analyst at EPC, who will present you the findings of the project we carried out with Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications. So Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annika, and good day to everyone, and happy to be here and present the main findings of our project and our research. And just would like to share the, just to see the document. Yeah, I think you can see it now. So yes, this is, I will present you the key findings of the discussion paper, which was launched today as part of the project we conducted in collaboration with the Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications. So the paper is out. It's available online on our website. I can also send you the link in the chat box afterwards, but you will also receive it in the follow-up to this discussion. So yeah, this paper is let's say the final output of the project on digitalization for circular economy, which focused on information transfer in particular. So we talk about the twin transition, the digital and circular, building on our previous work on this, but we actually zoomed in on the linkages between digital information transfer and circular economy in particular. And yeah, basically what we did, we organized 2 workshops in June and July to discuss the matter, coupled with additional correspondence with relevant stakeholders and the desk research. Yeah, the final output is this discussion paper. Maybe just to explain the logic, our line of thought when we were structuring our work and conducting our work on this matter. So we wish to achieve the circular economy, right? That's what we want to do, because yeah, it helps. It can reduce emissions, reduce resource depletion, reduce pollution, support our competitiveness, resilience. So we want circular economy, right? But it's a very complex economic model to transit to. It's actually more complicated than a linear economy model, because it depends on, it's based on this kind of a very complex system of communication, collaboration, coordination between different stakeholders, different organizations within a value chain, but also across different value chains, and also a different collaboration throughout the supply chain and within, let's say, throughout the life cycle of a product. It really it's a very complex thing to do, and in order for you to know, for example, how to repair a product or how to handle it so you can increase its lifespan and so forth, and just to also enable different partnerships and possibilities that can support circular practices, you need information, you need data, and you need this data to be actively shared, collected and shared across these different sectors. But that's the thing. It's complicated to communicate on this. It requires efforts, work, costs are even involved, and we need adequate tools to support information transfer for circular economy. That's where digitalization kicks in. So we need digital tools to support information transfer for circular economy, and that's when we talk about digital information transfer for circular economy. I mean, just to paint the whole picture, let's say. But then there is even a wider picture. So we have this twin green and digital transition, which then the idea is that it supports all these higher level also goals as envisaged by the European Green Deal, especially climate neutrality, but also supporting other sectors in mobility, food, energy, green electronics, zero pollution. But then circular economy feeds into all these efforts as envisaged by the European Green Deal. This is also another nice illustration to depict how do we try to conceive of digital information transfer for circular economy. So we see that there are existing mature digital tools, but there is also a sort of another layer of additional tools that are either yet to be developed or to be scaled up, building on the existing practices, such as, for example, the digital product passports. And all of these taken together can support our transition to a circular economy. And in the paper, I mean, of course, this is elaborated more in detail, but here this is just how it works, basically how it's structured. So we talk about different tools such as online platforms and databases, and Internet of Things, blockchain, and digital product passports, more or less this is how we categorize it. Online databases are sometimes separate, but we can also look at it as closely intertwined with online platforms. And we divide it into today's and tomorrow's solutions, meaning today's are those that are already in function, and there are those that are yet to be fully developed, as mentioned. For example, Skip platform is already developed, but it still needs to, we still need to start, it needs to communicate to the recyclers and waste operators this data that on chemicals that are provided by producers, for example. So it's somewhere in between, and it still needs to be further developed. Digital product passports are especially the case where we have interesting examples already, like circular fashion and others, but they need to be scaled up, and we need them more like a standardized system that can enable that they are taken and on a wider scale, and also to avoid fragmentation across different value chain supply chains. Because, as I mentioned, it's not the point to have circularity just in electronics. You need to have and to have information transfer just in electronics. You need to have it between the automotive sector and electronics, so that an old component in automotive in a car can be maybe recycled or reused to be used as a component in electronics or another value chain. So you need to have this. That's why it becomes more complex, and we need different tools. And as mentioned, Internet of Things is automated information sharing between devices. Blockchain enables secure transfer information between different stakeholders, and as mentioned, online platforms already maybe the most mature, most developed way of doing of sharing data and information. However, so there are cases, there are existing practices, but there are also challenges. One of it is the lack of access to good quality data. I'm not saying that that's always the case, but that's one of the things we identified. So it's not only about providing data, sharing data. It needs to be, you need to collect it. It needs to be reliable data that is collected, and needs to be purposeful, useful, actionable. It needs to be packaged and presented in a way that can actually add value to different stakeholders. There are, of course, good old concerns about data protection versus and data sharing and versus data protection and security, which hampers information sharing between different stakeholders, such as B2B, B2G, B2C situations. They're also we just need to be aware of the complexities. Supply chains are global, and there are different tiers in these supply chains. And just think of different supply chains for different sectors. So it's difficult to move ahead because you need to communicate between different suppliers of materials, manufacturers, the government, the consumer, so forth. So it just even with digitalization, this is achieving information transfer is easier said than done, especially if there are lack of incentives for businesses. We know that there is a strong economic rationale for circular economy, but sometimes in practice, it still needs to be ironed out. You need to, it's important to actually find very convincing cases, because it's not about moving also to a more beneficial system. It's also the cost. So achieving the transition from, for example, business model is based on just producing and selling goods with lower lifespan, where you don't actually have to see as a producer the product once it's sold out, to a system where you actually are tracing the product throughout its life cycle and maybe retrieving it in the end of life phase. That's easier said than done, and you need to have a very good economic case, unless we only want businesses to react to policy, to regulatory push. And there is a slow progress in digital transformation. It's not that nothing is happening, but it can be faster. And we talk about, be it 5G, be it greater internet coverage to start with that, and better connectivity and so forth. We need all of these digital solutions to support information transfer for circular economy. And and also then for businesses and other stakeholders, it's not always as simple to just do this kind of, it's not always so simple to actually achieve digital transformation in their industries, factories, assemblies, or their supply chains. Lastly, last but not the least, also what Annika mentioned, we always come back to the other side of the coin. So we have digital as an enabler, but we also have the question of there are also negative side effects of digitalization, such as emissions and e-waste. So we always need to keep this in mind. And ideally, we use digital as an enabler. We steer digitalization that way, but we also green digitalization. That's the best possible win-win solution we can hope for, and then we minimize all other unwanted consequences of this transition. Looking at policy recommendations, again, they are listed in detail in the paper. Please look at the paper for all the details. Of course, happy to discuss after my presentation on this, but basically they boil down to the following. We need to think big. We need the big holistic approach, strategic approach to this. And again, we are playing with this deadline of 2030 to achieve a sustainable digital information system for circular economy. So digital information system that serves the circular economy, but it's also green, sustainable by 2030. So that's our push for that objective. But also, I mean, we know that the Commission is already working on European data spaces. So, I mean, nothing to recommend, it's already happening. But what we would add, it needs to be effective. So we need to find a way to design this data space. I mean, this whole framework, so that it in the end, it really adds value, and it's not an additional, let's say, administrative burden on businesses to provide data that are not to be used in the end. And this is also linked to the rules on digital product passports. These are to be enabled by the data spaces, among other digital tools for information transfer. But I would say just that it's also based on previous discussions also I had, it's also important to think maybe in terms of the end results, a bit in a reversed way. We need to think what are the actual outputs, outcomes, and uses, the functions of the data space in terms of concrete tools, so that you can then actually develop a functional framework like a data space that can support concrete tools for information transfer in order to make it work. Also, we need to use economic financial tools to support digital information transfer here. This is the chance to improve our digital infrastructure, among other things, our digital skills. And here we have MFF, we have recovery tools, but also I would also highlight the sustainable finance agenda, where we can use private funds to channelize them not only for sustainable economic activities or circular activities, but we could potentially link digital information transfer, sustainable finance, and circular economy all wrapped into one. And there is already work on this. It's not that nothing is happening, but more can be done to establish these links in the upcoming taxonomy, for example, and other tools, other sub-agendas within the sustainable finance agenda. And then we need, of course, the EU needs to lead. This is our, just maybe it's not clear, these are the EU policy recommendations you can see on the left side. So it's all for the EU and different, Commission and the other EU institutions to consider. It's important to lead global efforts, because circular economy can't be achieved in Europe alone. It needs to be achieved worldwide, and as well as digitalization. We need common standards, rules, and certain common objectives to achieve worldwide, and to ensure that we achieve this transition and not to, result in fragmented markets or economic systems and solutions that then actually don't add any, that are not optimal, I would say. So in a nutshell, these are the key findings of our work. Additional details are available in the paper itself. These are just some previous publications we published, and this work on this project built on these. There are also other papers available on the EPC's website. So I invite you to also check them out. And thank you for your attention, and of course looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and indeed for our audience, happy to have your comments that you can post later to Stefan should you have any questions of clarification, etc. I'll hand over next to Agnieszka Skorupinska, who's a senior EU affairs advisor at Vodafone Group. So very delighted to have you here with us, and looking forward to your thoughts on this twin transition, on digitalization as an enabler for a circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika and Stefan. Very happy to be here. My name is Agnieszka Skorupinska, and I represent Vodafone. So Vodafone is a pan-European telco operator. In the EU, our services reach more than 61% of EU27 population. Therefore, we wish to be EU partners in achieving its green ambitions. Plus, we also take global commitments, because we are very much present in Africa. So when setting up our planet and climate objectives, we also look bigger, so that we can also export and promote good EU practices elsewhere. We are currently on a journey towards eliminating all carbon emissions from our activities by 2030 and becoming fully net zero by 2040. We are also committed to helping our customers reduce their own emissions, so-called enablement, and supporting governments and international organizations to address the climate emergency. Our two most material issues are energy and carbon emissions and e-waste generation, as mentioned by Stefan also in relation to ICT footprint. We do work on addressing those. So first of all, our European network went green and is now 100% powered by electricity from renewable sources. And our next major milestone will be to achieve the same step change in Africa by 2025. And of course, we work and invest in better efficiency of our data centers, because these are the most responsible energy points. We became also a founding member of the European Green Digital Coalition, bringing companies like us together with policymakers and experts to help drive digital solutions in action against climate change. But more precisely, and focusing on the topic of today's discussion, in terms of circular economy for Europe and the twin digital and green transition, we do the following. So first of all, getting our house in order. In terms of our own footprint, we have committed to reusing, reselling, or recycling 100% of our redundant network equipment by 2025. In addition, we are also taking action to reduce the impact of the devices we sell through take-back schemes, sales of refurbished devices, repair services, and partnerships. We are also a member of the Circular Electronics Partnership, which brings electronics companies and global organizations together to set a vision and roadmap for circular economy for electronics by 2030. We focus a lot on information transfer in today's event. We together with other European operators, we launched so-called the Eco Rating scheme for mobile phones, where we try to give information to our customers. They can find it on our website about devices they are buying. And we have a set of criteria, notably durability, reparability, recyclability, resource efficiency, and so on and so on. And it is a perfect example on how information should flow, because we are not the device producers. So we need to work closely with device manufacturers to be able to provide this information to them. So yeah, once we get our house in order, then we can claim that digital has the enablement power, and we believe that connectivity and digital solutions are essential in enabling a more circular economy and society. For example, through product tracing or enabling the move from product-based to services-based models. So selling cars versus selling mobility, for instance. We also have our big data analytics business that we also reshape so that it works for climate. So for instance, together with municipalities and cities, we work on efficient transportation infrastructure planning. So by analyzing the mobility patterns, it allows municipalities and cities to be more informed about public transport situation and plan it better and look into CO2 emission reductions, etc., etc. And we are also very active, for instance, in digital agriculture space, thanks to our agri hub called Mezzanine, where we want to prove that technology can deliver to farmers, to consumers, and to climate. How we do this, with our solutions, we want to prove to farmers that they can participate in the market, because what they ultimately care about is to have clients and to have demand. So digital can enable this marketplace approach. Secondly, better use their resources thanks to smart solutions. And then for customers, It enables traceability of products and gives more transparency about products, and that hopefully contributes to awareness and better footprint of products, which leads to behavioral change and hopefully demand-driven transition. So we want the Green Deal to become a new business model, but we need the enabling environment, so connectivity, skills, investments, both public and private, data and collaboration between all stakeholders, and co-creation in fora like yours. And your study mentions all of this. And your study also rightly defines the problem, the lack of information transfer across value chains. And we believe that digital can break these silos. But as said, we first need to tackle the ICT footprint, and the second, we need the right regulatory framework, both policy, mainly around data, and financial. So yeah, taxonomy incentives, recovery funds, and so on. So yeah, let's make digital solution the catalyst for change, and I'm looking forward to discussing it further during this session.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. And indeed, we'll be happy to come back to some of these elements in the discussion. As our next speaker, we have William Neale, who's advisor for circular economy and green growth at DG Environment, European Commission. And we're very delighted to have you here today to talk about the state of play, as well as the prospective developments on how we can enable information transfer for circular economy. Thank you, William. The floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Annika. Thanks, Stefan. And congratulations to the EPC on this report. As ever, perfect timing. As you know, we're in the midst of developing our proposals for the digital product passport now. We're working on the impact assessment. And this kind of input is really extremely useful for us, especially very much this approach based on really good examples and on all of the work that you've done in the run-up through various meetings. So thank you very much for that. I thought I'd focus a little bit now on the reason why we're focusing on linking products and data, why we think that's important, why we're using single market now as a means to sort of push sustainability, and why data is an important part of that. And I start off as usual, as many of you will heard, I'm very keen to always emphasize the importance of value retention as being sort of the central tenet of circularity, that resource efficiency is important when it comes to sort of input to industry. Recycling is important, but the most important thing is making sure that the products and the assets in our economies last, and that we use them for longer and more intensively, more optimally. Why? I mean, I could give two examples from two product areas. One would be both of them in sort of the key value chains, which we've identified in the Circular Economy Action Plan. If you look at our clothes that we wear, why do we get rid of them? Well, 42% is because they don't fit. Another 26% is because we don't like them anymore. Only 19% we get rid of because they're actually worn out or damaged. And then if you look at smartphones, about 60% of them are replaced because we want an upgrade, either in the hardware or software, and only about 40% because they're not working. And in both cases, I mean, in clothes, we're wearing them fewer and fewer times, reduced by 36% in the last 15 years. If you look at smartphones, we use them for on average 18 months. So in effect, we're losing billions by discarding these perfectly functional products. There's a bit of a myth of the rational consumer. Part of being a rational consumer is about data and access to information, but also a lot to do with the physical attributes. And as Agnieszka said, we need to really make the business models work that can create a market for second-hand or for the reuse of those products. Of course, when we lose those billions, we're also losing the embodied carbon and materials in those products, which have to be mined again for new products. We have all of the externalities involved with that, with the extraction and processing required to making new products. So these market failures, whether they're informational or not, were already there before, what has made them more important now is that in the Anthropocene, we're really reaching planetary boundaries, and although our sort of linear model has worked fairly well, providing well-being to millions of people in the past, we're at a different order of grandeur now. So we really need to find ways to decouple our resource use from those products and from the impacts. So the idea really was in the Circular Economy Action Plan was to use single market tools, to use what we're calling the Sustainable Product Initiative, and to basically start from the Eco-Design Directive and to expand the scope of that to non-energy using products, and also to expand the criteria to a whole series of circularity and sustainability criteria. So going beyond energy use, or energy efficiency in the use phase. So looking at things like durability, repairability, and so on. Now, the other thing, I mean, eco-design has existed for a while and has been very successful in what it's done. And so we're looking to apply this, as I said, with those wider scopes to the physical attributes. But the other thing which has come along is, of course, the data revolution, and the fact that the amount of data that we have is so important. And also, data is so important to the value of a product. When I say that circular economy is about value retention, so much of the value of a product now is about the data which is attached to that product. And we lose so much of that data as it makes its journey through the economy. So what we're really looking at doing basically with the digital product passport is attaching data to the product. So quite simply, we have an obligation for a unique identifier on the product, and then we have a series of obligations or requirements to make data available that can be sourced via that identifier. But I mean, there are many examples of similar initiatives that have taken place. Some of them I think are set out very well in the EPC report, which is just now published. If you look at the examples that I gave earlier, if you look at clothes, for example, what could such a passport do in terms of, you know, how could that data be useful? Well, it can be useful for enabling B2B value retention activities, for helping to get access to revenue from resales, for getting post-sales intelligence, for providing the means to meet transparency requirements and due diligence requirements. It can be used to ensure authentication of products for second consumers and to combat counterfeit as well in relation to that. It can be used for providing proof of alignment with taxonomy in future, potentially. In terms of business to consumers, it can ensure that there's tried and trusted information and transparency. It could lead to development of apps which could tailor information to your consumption habits, and provide you with clearer choices. It could provide information on access to repair. It could facilitate resale. It could help with access to peer-to-peer services, so for consumers also. And then if we look at business to government, it would help us in different levels of government to analyze the gaps in investment. It could help us to look at the challenges and to help with the reporting on collection and sorting. It could help us with green public procurement. So there are very, very many. I mean, there's a whole panoply of potential benefits from being able to have that data attached to products. Now, the digital product passport, as I said, is under development. I can't give a lot of details about the final technical specifications, how it will roll out, and if I did today, I think that it would potentially be subject to change, as we're still very much in internal discussions in the Commission. But I think that it's clear that the added value of the EU regulating here has a lot to do with, I think it's clear in the report, that Stefan said, that digital technologies can accelerate linear, unsustainable consumption and production just as easily as they can enable circular modes of or circular systems. And I think that's actually one of the issues that we've had in the taxonomy. How do you actually define or how do you actually identify where something is enabling? Because you really need to look at what it's used for. So it's sort of kind of ex post, it's what you use it for. I think what the European Union can do by providing a good regulatory framework to ensure that the technologies are used for circularity and not for unsustainable practices is that we can harness the single market tools. We have the collective consumer power of 150 million consumers. We have the capacity to convene all of the right actors. I mentioned some of the voluntary approaches that have been very successful, but we're really able to ensure that we convene all of the right actors and that we're able to arbitrate. And it's very much about process. It's not so much about technology, in my view. The technologies exist. We can ensure that there is technical and semantic interoperability, open sourcing, that we have common rules. We can ensure that the compliance arrangements are in place, and also that the responsibility is allotted correctly for the responsibility for providing the data. And we can also, of course, ensure that the whole process is taken in the public interest as a founding principle. We also need to make sure of certain challenges in respect of data, such as the durability of data. So data needs to be available, for example, after bankruptcy of a company. So we need to be designing this kind of thing into our design. We need to ensure that we regulate for the access rights and sort of differentiated access rights, and make sure that data is searchable with sort of different levels of access rights. So I'm just throwing out a few of these challenges. I realize that I'm going on a little bit, so I'll maybe stop there and be very happy to come back in the panel discussion, and also to sort of mention some of the interactions that we will have with the European data spaces and with the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and so on. So I'll leave it there for now, Annika.
Thank you very much, William, and thank you already for providing this, both the context, but then also giving us a bit of an overview of where we are at the moment. And indeed, we'll be happy to come back to these additional elements later. I'll then move on to our next speakers. I will first have Francesca Poggiali, who's the Chief Public Policy Officer for Europe at GS1, and it'll be very interesting to hear about your work on information transfer for circular economy. So, Francesca,
thank you,
Annika,
and thank you, EPC, for the wonderful opportunity today. We're very pleased to be here, and thanks for your study. I'm looking forward to having some time today to read it. I'll be very happy to share my comments also later on. So thanks a lot. And it was really very interesting to listen to Agnieszka, to see the company's challenges that they are now facing, and that they've been facing, of course. And thanks, William, for having shared your directions and where we are going and where you want to go. From my side, where I sit on GS1, let me maybe just share 1 second what GS1 is, because some of our participants may not be aware. I'm sure all of you know the barcode. So the barcode is a global standard, is an ISO standard that is maintained. It was developed, but it is also maintained by GS1. So today we were already speaking a little bit about the QR code. So we're speaking here how to make knowledge and data being transferred. And I guess the data carriers that are kept by GS1 globally open can, are, an important pillar of this discussion. So thanks again for having us. So I would just have, a few points. I'm not sharing slides for the purpose of the debate. I want this really to be interactive, as Stefan told me. So I really want to point out to 10 requirements 10 features that I was thinking about when, thinking about the product passport based on our experience, because it's 50 years that the GS1 open standards are enabling data for B2C and B2G and B2B along different supply chains and global supply chains. So I try to simplify some of the messages. And I have to say that we would really like to see the product passport being at first green. What do I mean? Green in the sense that it should be able to enable green data requirements. So companies like Vodafone and others that are doing a tremendous effort and incredible investments to develop their green knowledge and green data, I mean, they should be able to have these data requirements being transferred along the circle, along the new business model, along the circular business model with all partners. So we think that the digital product passport should be not just digital, but also, you know, be inclusive of green requirements, because in this way we will achieve a win-win situation. I mean, having the green transition and the digital transition happening at the same time. Something else that we thought about is that it should be ethical. What does it mean? It means that we would like this to be able to transfer data requirements on due diligence efforts that companies are doing, because those due diligence efforts are really very important for consumers, for companies, for all of us, for many, many reasons that sometimes it's even difficult to list. So we know this is possible today. For instance, we know we are piloting in different sectors with in different environments. We are piloting, and we know that this is possible to reduce very complex certifications and data, and very complex, but it is possible to reduce them to one data requirement that can be exchanged through the product passport. So we believe it can be green, it can be ethical. We also wish it could be light, in the sense that we are also embracing this change, and so we hope that it won't be, for instance, a mandatory list of 50 data requirements immediately for all sectors, because this is where, we will also lose some of the participants, and we will lose the momentum. We are all conscious about the 2050 goal and the 2030 goal that Agnieszka has reminded. We know companies have their own timelines as well. We all want to make it, but we need a step-by-step approach, in the sense that we need this to happen on the products that now are more, let's say, are more able to make an environmental impact, like the batteries. I mean, the European Commission started with the batteries, and in all meetings I've been, and with the working group that we opened with the battery, the Global Battery Alliance and the European Battery Alliance, we see that this is feasible if we have the right environment where all partners can discuss and go maybe a little bit slower, but they can go all together, because we can go much farther than being alone and running with only one solution. And so light is also very important for us. Another feature that we would like this to have is that it should be open, in the sense that it should enable interoperability, because it's just like for us, the human beings, we all have our passports, but if we go in one airport and then we are stopped because we cannot go through because our passport is not read or is not accepted, I mean, this will stop. And the same will happen with goods. Goods can be stopped at the border, and unfortunately during the COVID we've seen disasters happening, right? So we need this to be open, in the sense that it should be read by all technologies. It should be also not closed or protected by royalties, and so it should be. And our IP policy is published on our website. I'm always very happy to answer to any question on our IP policy, but it should be based in brief on global and open standards, because this is the only way to allow all companies. And so the other feature is that the product passport should be inclusive, allowing all companies, the big ones, the small ones, those that were born digital, but those who were born maybe 2 centuries ago and who are now transitioning to be digital. And so using the standards that are already there will certainly help companies to to meet those challenges, because they were already collecting data, product data, based on the standards and the tools that they had already. So we shouldn't be now reinventing the wheel, but also, you know, go have a vision for the future based on what we already developed. So this is what we meant when we said that we want this to be inclusive, open, based on global standard. And another feature is about decentralization. What do I mean? The product passport can enable really decentralization in the sense that companies today have the responsibility of the products that they put on the market, and they have also the responsibility of the data that they manage. Some companies are very good in structuring data. Others maybe put it a little bit aside because they are taken by other goals and other priorities. So this product passport can be really an enabler of companies' better digitalization and data management systems, you know, and so this is why I say that this should be really technical agnostic, and really the data should stay where it is with companies. And through standards today, if companies, for instance, could create a website where they put all the data requirements that the European Commission is asking for, well, the standards can enable having just a URL embedded in the QR code, and when you scan it, you go to that web page. You can go elsewhere. Of course, there are plenty of opportunities, but in this way, the product passport will be achievable, can be cheaper, and if we go step by step, at least we will start from here. And even small companies that cannot afford a big data infrastructure for the companies, and they all have websites today, they can have a regulatory page where they can disclose the information, but also they can update this information immediately. And the European Commission, of course, and the regulators also at national level, if they want to keep track of these pages, because they need to have access to this information, because it is about liability, we understand it. William was speaking about the Eco-Design Directive, there are other regulations coming. And so if the regulators need to have access to those websites, they can keep a track and trace of the URLs in a very green ICT way, meaning that they can have a kind of receiving information and not consuming a lot of energy, not creating huge databases, not really consume more energy than what we all want to save, because we are trying to do two things together, right? The circular economy and digitalization. And so I just wanted to give some background of where I stand, what we see based on the standards. We want to give also a lot of hope, because I hear some company people are concerned. We want to say that the standards are there, that it is possible to be achieved, and that the standards really can enable this transition. And we are already doing this, so we are very happy to use this opportunity. Maybe just 1 second to say that for the battery sectors, I see a lot of progress there, and the product passport is being prototyped according to the regulation that was published in 2020. And so I hope the same can happen for the other sectors. So thank you, and I remain available for questions, of course.
Thank you, Francesca, for this overview. I think that is very helpful and very interesting to have your input. And we'll be happy to come back to some of these issues in the discussion. I'll hand over now to Gabriel Crean, who's advisor to the Minister of the Economy at the government of Luxembourg. And it will be very interesting to hear about Luxembourg's approach to enhancing circular economy with the help of digitalization, as you have some interesting work going on in this space. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Annika, and thank you and Stefan for the opportunity to talk this afternoon. Your report is really excellent. The EU policy recommendations, you'll see several of them already reflected in our thinking in Luxembourg as well, so we're very well aligned. I suppose the challenge for most of the member states and the Union is how to align the digital transformation and the green transition, and how to really have a competitively sustainable economy. Because if we're not competitive, it won't be sustainable. So, and that's really the perspective that we come from. I just want to share, if I may, on the screen, just 1 or 2 slides to show you some of the things that we have been doing. if this works. Very good. So as I said, one of our key actions in the past year has been developing a roadmap. We call it a roadmap because we wanted some very specific steps in that roadmap for a competitive and sustainable economy. The roadmap is called Ons Wirtschaft voor morgen. It's our economy of the future. It's Luxembourgish for our economy of the future. And I'll take some examples from that to show you what we're doing, and in particular, how we're enabling a circular economy via digital routes. The roadmap that we've published builds on a previous strategy document, which was the data-driven innovation strategy for a trusted and sustainable economy. So we already had a data economy strategy and indeed dealing with sustainability. And you can see the 6 building blocks here. The first is accelerating this digitized economy, accelerating the digital transformation. But the second one addresses exactly where your report is, enabling the circular economy transition. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And then other key steps you see in there would be block 4, the secure and trusted data economy transformation. But number 5 also echoes to something that Annika said, in that digitalization comes with a significant environmental footprint. And here we want to try and ensure at Luxembourg a sustainable digital transition. And I'll show you just one example of that. And lastly, and it's addressed in your EU policy recommendations, we need the appropriate financial instruments, we need the appropriate green funds. Without those, we can do very little. So it's also a supportive environment that we need. So what I want to take is just 3 examples. The first would be addressing directly the topic of the dialogue this afternoon, driving a digitally enabled circular economy transition. And as William has said, we need to link products and data. And we do lose a lot of data as a product moves across and through our value chain. So I want to show you one example of action we took there. In terms of a sustainable digital transition, we have to ensure that we're putting in place the greenest infrastructure, the greenest products possible. And lastly, we've talked about a supportive environment. So the first example that I'd like to share with you is what we call the product circularity datasheet. This is an initiative directly from the Luxembourg Ministry of Economy, and it's really addressing what William has said, the need to link product and data. We know the traditional information flow. I won't explain it to this sophisticated audience, but what we need to do is link data with product at each stage of the value chain, and enable us to be able to track value throughout that value chain. And that's what the Luxembourg Ministry of Economy has been putting in place. And again, echoing to some of the comments both from Francesca on standards and also earlier, and indeed in your policy recommendations, one of the last recommendations is taking a leading role in internationalization. So we're listening carefully. And in fact, if I can move to the next slide, you can see that we've taken quite a strong role, our colleague Jerome Petri in the Ministry of Economy, on putting forward a standardization of a product circularity data sheet. And it's interesting to see that the co-convener of this is Chinese agency. So this need is global, and Europe has to try and maintain its lead in this area. And I think the excellent work the Commission is doing, and what we'll see coming out very soon, will ensure that. So that's one example where we've been directly active and also reactive to what we see as needed to push a European Union position forward. We need standardization, and we need to lead in that standardization. So, and then coming to what Annika said on digitalization comes with a significant environmental footprint and potential penalty. We've taken that to heart as we drive our digital transformation. And I wanted to give one example where Luxembourg has recently put in place a high-performance supercomputing facility to underpin our data economy. This is in particular for the large number of SMEs in the economy. And what I wanted to share with you is that we've taken particular attention working with technology suppliers to ensure that we have the greenest supercomputer in Europe. And in fact, the fourth greenest machine in the world. But I say, as regarding a practical machine, probably the greenest in the world. So again, I think we have to walk the talk. It's no use saying we'll accelerate the digital transformation, but we want a green economy. We have to address the sustainability of that digital transformation. And that's definitely what we're trying to do from the Ministry of Economy in Luxembourg. And then finally, and again, in your EU policy recommendations, you mention several words on different financial instruments, InvestEU, Next Generation EU, etc. Funding for all these instruments has to be found, and I'm pleased that Luxembourg launched really the first exchange in the world for the platform dedicated entirely to sustainable securities. And I think it was only right that a historic bond was launched from Luxembourg just some weeks ago to underpin our recovery and resilience programs. So from the point of view of data, information transfer tracking, we have the product circularity data sheet, which is our contribution. At home, we are ensuring that new digital infrastructure, our digital transformation, not only within the public sector, but also as major projects come to the Ministry of Economy, that we address the sustainability of these digital transformation projects and support them, because there is a green premium and it has to be supported, and we don't say that sufficiently. And lastly, to do that, we need different platforms as well. So just a snapshot. I was asked to keep it to a few minutes, so but delighted to be here. Again, thank EPC again for an excellent report. It's on my desk, and we really look forward to contributing to this dialogue, both at national and at European level with William and colleagues. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you everyone for your input. And I actually, before turning to the audience, I'll be happy to give you a chance to react to one another, what you've heard. And I'm especially looking at William. We had two very interesting approaches, two very interesting interventions at the end. Kind of one more from a local approach, one more of a global approach, and we'll be very happy to hear your reactions also to these. But obviously, if anyone else wishes to join in, do so. But maybe I'll hand over first to William, if you have any thoughts that you wish to add.
Well, yes, thank you very much, and thank you to all of the other speakers. And I have to say that we've been aware of the Luxembourg product circularity data sheets example, and we've certainly been quite inspired by that, for example. I thought I would just, because there were a couple of things which I maybe didn't make clear, and I think that Francesca was putting a finger on a couple of things where I should, before people get too worried, provide some reassurances. The first is that, I mean, we are really focusing on sustainability and circularity with our digital product passport. I think that the possibilities are endless. I mean, if you have a unique identifier on a product, I mean, of course you can do all the due diligence things, and that may come into it as well. But you can do all kinds of policy or business related things with the product passport. But for the moment, we're keeping it to sustainability and circularity. And very important, I mean, we intend to start small. We're really looking at identifying the most important bits of information that, if they're not provided, would inhibit circularity, value retention, and so on. A second thing which is very important to emphasize is that we will be looking at it on a product by product or product group by product group basis. We'd be sort of mimicking the eco-design process. So we will be having implementing measures per product group, and for each product group, of course, there would be an analysis, stakeholder consultations, getting everybody around the table and making sure that we're really being very relevant to that particular product group. We're not talking about, Francesca was saying, having 50 different things for, the sort of blanket approach, 50 different pieces of data that you'd have to provide on every product, because that is just not necessary and would create a lot of extra burden. The third thing is that it would be distributed data mostly. I mean, very, very little need for centralized data. We're not talking about inputting large amounts of data into a big server in a Brussels basement. We're talking about access to the data, and one means of doing that, I think it was it Agnieszka that was, maybe it was again Francesca that was talking about having the data available on company websites. Now, the possibility would be to have some kind of resolver which would give you access to that data depending on your level of sort of access, depending on what kind of access you were allowed to have, and that could be rather done automatically. So just a few design aspects, which I did say that we can't really divulge what's going to be the final outcome, but I think there's no secret that in all of those cases, those will be the approaches.
Yes, Francesca.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, William, for those clarifications. It really helps. And for me, the greatest challenge is really to have the right stakeholders having the same understanding of where we're going. And I guess as soon as we see the Commission proposal, things will be clearer. And I also want to share the fact that I see a lot of eagerness from companies, including for small and medium, to participate and to play their part. So they've been knocking at our door at standards level. We also have our internal challenges. Of course, as I was saying, the barcode has been using for 50 years. The barcode is 50 this year, actually, allowing those data exchange. But now we see that consumers also need to play the role, and we are all consumers, we want to know more about the products we buy. And so we know that the QR code will be all the data metrics. I mean, you need a two-dimension carrier in order to enable the data exchange in a way that is important for consumers as well and meaningful for them. And so we are happy to give an acceleration to the 2D transition that we were already facing globally. But we were doing this for purely, logistic and data-driven reasons and business reasons. But now circularity is giving us a very important reason. And there was one question in the chat talking about what consumers could do. Well, I guess already giving access to consumers to product data through an open carrier. So in a way that the consumer doesn't need to pay any app, doesn't need to download special features in order to access to the data that the consumer is buying. I guess this is an important part of this discussion, and this is why open carriers are there. Then more sophisticated data systems can always happen. I don't want to be perceived as being really a barrier. No, I mean, actually the standards are the entry point in order for other and more sophisticated, and maybe, we can't even imagine what the circular economy will bring us. So there will be other data systems, maybe, done on a special with a special technology. But here we're speaking about the general way to transfer data for the category of products that William clarified. So we want to be sure that companies can use the standards at first in order to then open the door to other solutions. And we are part of the Luxembourg initiative. So I want to thank Mr. Crean, because we've been collaborating on the digital safety sheet, and it's based on global standards, and this is why the communication is also happening among the peers through the global trade identification number. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to see if anyone else wanted to still come in. We indeed, yes, Agnieszka.
very briefly on 2 points that were mentioned both by Francesca and William about the multi-stakeholder approach. I can only subscribe to that, because as digital companies, we are not farmers, we are not energy companies, we are not transport companies. So that we build solutions that fit for purpose, we need to understand this sector's needs so that we do not mismatch each other. So extremely important point. And then finally, on customers and consumers, we need skills so that people really embrace this challenge also, because it's not enough to give apps to people without really presenting them what it brings to their lives. This is how we are constructed, right? We only get a buy-in if there is something for citizens. So, you know, when building solutions, for instance, around smart meters, you need to somehow prove that their energy bills will be lower, maybe, hopefully. So, you know, this kind of campaigns also need to take place. Same thing with farmers. The experience we have when talking to them is that they perceive technology as surveillance tool and not as something that can help them. So it's really important, and it's a basis for everything, so that we indeed accelerate the transition with the digitization and not get pushbacks and create some counter movements.
Thank you very much. And just to say, I see that we have a lot of questions coming from our audience in, and I hope that we'll be able to address as many of those. But William, I know that you also wanted to come back on the issue of the data space and the Data Act. And so I think that maybe we can start with that. And I hope that that will also help to address some of the questions that we have there online, and I'll then follow up with the others.
Yeah, thanks, Annika. Yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, I was concentrating on the product passport itself, and a lot of it has to do with sort of product generated data, whether that's sort of static or dynamic data. It could be, you know, data sort of about what's in the product. It could be information about what happens to the product after it's been put on the market, even. But there are, of course, other kinds of data, and again, the EPC report identifies quite a lot of these things, like the SCIP database for substances of concern in products. There's footprinting data. There are many different sources of data, and we need to see how we can provide some kind of an interface between the product generated data and the other kinds of data, which might be more centralized, might already be collected, certainly already exist. And we would see the European data spaces as being the means to do that. We have, and I think that the report was saying that, you know, we should avoid sort of fragmentation between the different data spaces. I see it as one data space with several sort of areas within it. We're not talking about duplicating or fragmentation. So we have the sort of manufacturing data space, which will have a lot of useful information about things like reverse logistics and so on. We will have the Green Deal data space, and within that we will have the European data space for smart circular applications, which I think would be the natural home for sort of the interface between these different kinds of data related to the product passport. And then fundamental to the overall approach is the European approach to data. Again, your report talks about the Data Act and the Data Governance Act, and we really need to ensure that the European approach to data isn't a surveillance approach like we see in some parts of the world. It isn't a let's give it all to the big data companies approach, but it's one which is rather balanced, based on public interest, based on fairness, based on the balance of rights and obligations. And particularly relevant to the digital product passport is the use of privately held data, commercial data, in the public interest. And the Data Act, which I think will be adopted at the end of this year, is really intending to address that and find the right way to do that. And I think that's really fundamental as a principle underneath it. And if I may, Annika, just on the consumer, because a lot of people have been mentioning consumer aspects. I mean, as you know, sort of parallel with our sustainable product initiative, the Commission is developing the sort of empowering consumers in the green transition initiative, including things like right to repair and consumer information. and also the Green Claims Initiative, where we're looking to make sure that any claims about something being eco or green are actually backed up by verifiable sort of footprinting methodologies. And I think in both cases, being able to attach that kind of data to a product passport would really enable consumers to have access to more verifiable data. And again, the same goes with green public procurement. I see in the chat there was a reference to green public procurement. We have green public procurement criteria we have for a long time. We're developing them more and more. We've just released them for data centers even. But in order to make green public procurement work better, we really need to know more about the life cycle impacts of different kinds of products. I mentioned textiles. We're procuring a lot of things like uniforms and work clothes on a public basis. I think it's 1 or 2% of textiles in Europe. And if we're able to use that data from the digital product passport to really know and measure the sustainability, then I think that will help to have not just a sort of lowest cost approach to procurement in terms of the initial purchase, but the life cycle cost being brought into it.
Thank you. And I'll pick on some of the questions that I see that I think can be interesting to come back to still. So on the consumers, and indeed, there's a question, how do we involve consumers? And the question is also, I link this with the other question that there is, the role of digital tools as complementary, for example, on back labels, so that to what extent in the current discussions these kind of different approaches are being considered. Then there's the question around governance issues around digital product passports and blockchain solutions. Who owns the data? Who manages these systems? Is it public, private? Is it hybrid? And do we have digital infrastructure to track products globally? And I think I would be very happy to just link on to this question around the global dimension, because indeed, ultimately, most of the value chains, supply chains are global. So what is the thinking at the moment? At what is it short term, medium term, is it long term, that we hope that ultimately we'll be able to have global digital product passports? And what is the ambition of the European Commission, the EU at this stage, and kind of at what point could we envisage that we really enhance this required global collaboration on digital product passports? I also find that it's a very interesting question comes from the building sector. For example, the lifetime of buildings creates a lot of challenges for industry to manage digital product passports. So how can we maintain digital product passports, for example, for sectors like buildings, where the lifetime is such long? And this, maybe Francesca will be able to pick on this. Stefan, there was a question on, do you see potential that digitalization could assist or to be coupled with mapping resource flows data? And maybe there's someone else who wants to pick on this as well. And then just finish off, there's a comment, or I take this as a comment, that while digitalization is useful to increase transparency, it's essential that collection of data and collection of lots of data doesn't jeopardize the efforts to actually reduce our use of resources. So I think that this continues coming back, is that then digitalization and digital transition itself needs to be green if it is to be a real enabler for this transition. But so a number of questions in there. I'll be happy to take responses, and just yes, Gabriel, go first.
I'd be happy to address the question on do we believe there is a potential for digitalization to assist in be coupled with mapping resource flows. We haven't discussed resource flows much, but it's becoming central in terms of European Union sovereignty discussions, etc. And actually, I had one slide on that I skipped, and I thought I might just show it for the future, if I may, for 1 second. Let me do that again, because this is a particular interest of mine. I was in a previous, can I find this? I'm screen sharing, okay. Excuse me, here we are, this is the slide. Can you see that there? Yeah, so what you can see is resource recovery, I believe, for the European Union will become a strategic capability. What you see on this slide is the number of years remaining before different materials will be exhausted. And this is with current use. As we ramp up electric battery and many other electrical mobility solutions, these will come to a head. So you can see indium 13 years, you can see gold 45 years, antimony 30 years, and all the way through silver 29 years. And so resource recovery, recovering our resources after we move through recycling, etc., will become a strategic capability. And we believe in the future, in fact, that when both for retaining multinationals here in the manufacturing sector, attracting also FDI into Europe, and building out new space, we will need to have this capability. And here I believe that the question that was posed is a very interesting one, and one that the union and particularly the Commission should also look at, is how can we map and close the loop on elemental resources as well, not only products in their form. So I just said I'd show that slide that you can see there, and just to open up also a discussion and perhaps a placeholder for another discussion on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Stefan.
Yes, so yeah, happy just to build on that question on mapping resources rather than only, let's say, products. I would say that, first of all, I mean, digital product passports can also help with tracing the sourcing of materials throughout the supply chain that in the end is provided as part of the product itself. So in that sense, digital product passports build on this resource mapping as well. But then just looking beyond just products, you can use different tools. I mean, online platforms, different kinds of monitoring platforms to map resources being extracted. Also, urban mine is an interesting concept, you know, to map these materials already in our economy, so we can locate it and then recover it and reuse it in our economy. Blockchain is an interesting tool so far. What we also found out that you can ensure more transparency and let's say more secure provision of this information, more transparent, more reliable. However, the first information is tricky. You need to ensure still a sort of a manual auditing of the first information, but once this is proven, then you can actually come back to the source and track also this information about how are materials sourced and where they are and so forth, be it mining, extraction, but also it's interesting to look at other prospects, such as example improving industrial symbiosis, which traditionally existed for decades, but limited to certain geographical zones, industrial zones. But potentially, if you connect it digitally and different stakeholders update each other via digital means about supply and demand for byproducts that are inputs for a new product in another industry, if you have this kind of updates on the supply and demand availabilities, you can improve industrial symbiosis and also maybe extend it beyond a particular geographical zone. And I also understand that improved monitoring on industrial symbiosis is envisaged by the circular economy agenda from 2020. So I mean, these are interesting prospects. Also just for material tracing, looking beyond products. One more thing I wanted to touch upon is the regulatory aspect in terms of managing data. Who is responsible for data, for maintaining this sort of online platforms, and even if they are decentralized? It's very important question. And especially, like also as William mentioned, if a company goes bankrupt, in that case, if you don't have a centralized database, the question is what happens then? And yeah, I mean, and one thing is, of course, it's easier for regulatory public authorities to store this data, to recover it, but then this data also needs to be accessible to users, to someone who is using an old electronics and needs to repair it, and the company goes bankrupt. So then the question is, who pays for it, who maintains it? And it's a practical issue of costs and benefits. And I would say that there is a good case also for public authorities to be involved in this. I'm also entertained by the fact that to some extent, this whole discussion on data storage and management, especially decentralized, very much resembles the discussion over extended producer responsibility, in my view. To some extent, it's connected. And in this case, it's not necessarily that it's sort of a burden on businesses, because if businesses want decentralized information sharing, in a way that they gain something by that. But also, if they are then responsible for maintaining these databases, their own databases or online websites or whatever is accessible via digital product passports, that's also something that's compliant with this producer responsibility idea. But then we would need to talk about the guarantees, like we have now for e-waste management or in other waste streams, and how big these guarantees would be. Is this too costly or not? So yeah, the devil is in the details, but it's very important to talk about these things. Otherwise, yeah, there may be problems in the future.
Thank you. And William, before I turn to you, I noticed that Francesca wanted to jump in. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. I will be very brief. The standards allow today already for regulatory purposes or other purposes to, have access to the information that you were mentioning. So for instance, after the bankrupt of one company, of course, consumers need access to the product data, regulators need access to the product data. So this is possible to be achieved in a very, I would say, green ICT way, which is just to keep records for maybe, and in this way, I'm also answering to the question that was put in the chat. Imagine a building who is 200 years old. I was born in Rome, so it's easy for me to imagine this. So imagine, and you want to keep knowledge of the products that have been used in that building for renovation and so on and so forth. So today this is possible without consuming a lot of energy, without thinking about having, heavy data infrastructures and so on. So you can imagine, like when you are sleeping, your PC receives emails, even, and so it would be more or less the same thing. A resolver can enable regulators, consumers, any other stakeholders who has an interest to have access to the product data, to still have access to the product data in a way that is not very heavy for the environment, not very energy consuming, which means that there is a resolver who is like a library where you find a list of links, the URLs that have been used. And also in the other example that was made, if one company buys another company, and by doing so, normally companies buy the products, they also buy the websites and the data. And so the data is transferred. So, I mean, we can, of course, always brainstorm, but those cases are quite, it shouldn't be this a barrier to enable the digital product passport to go on and see the light. These are cases that we can, of course, settle down. We are piloting some of those cases already, so it would be great to have other opportunities to share our knowledge. I hope I answered the question as well in the chat, but I will type in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also want to see, Agnieszka, if you have any reactions you want to come in.
Yes, very quick reaction to the infrastructure question. Of course, we are not there yet, unfortunately, but we hope that recovery funds can help in bridging this infrastructure gap. Never before we had the funds being available, the technology ready, and the political will from the EU leadership. So yeah, let's just seize the moment. And very briefly on the ownership of data, it is an internal and infernal question in Brussels. And yeah, I will just answer how we see this. We are going towards the human-centered / data democratic times, but we need to make sure that we secure commercial / investment / innovation aspect of data as well for companies to keep investing and innovating. So maybe very lastly on the global aspects, because of course the climate is a global topic. You know, we are all very proud that Europe is the leading continent, and as I said, we try to be ambassadors of EU standards in our operations in Africa, but it eventually needs to be tackled globally. And you've mentioned global passports, but I'm also thinking about global KPIs measurement as well, right? So every country now has their KPIs and targets. Every company will soon have those. So only globally measuring it can really make a real impact. So let's also think about this kind of solutions and how digital can measure global advancements and keep people accountable eventually. So yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Agnieszka. I'm looking at the time and know that we don't have much time. And so I want to keep a chance for William to come back to all of those questions that we didn't have a chance yet to comment on. But I also, because I know that our audience, I'm sure that they're very interested in also understanding kind of what is the timeline at the moment. So can you just give our audience a bit of a guidance on what are the initiatives, milestones, deadlines, stakeholders interested in this should keep in mind? And is it also, are you looking for any kind of input at the moment from stakeholders that they could perhaps provide for you while you're continuing to work on the data space and on, obviously on the digital product passports as well?
Thanks, Annika. Well, there are so many rabbit runs you can go on. It's so interesting that it's difficult to be brief. But yeah, on the timing, we're looking at first quarter 2022, as was said in the chat. I can confirm that. I mean, there's always a possibility of slippage. It's a very complex area to work on, and sort of bridging the digital and sustainability divides it's quite difficult to explain everything, and it's very challenging, but I have every confidence we'll keep to that timeline. We are in the last stages of putting our impact assessment together, so it's a bit late for input, but it's still possible. The sort of formal public consultation is closed, but we are always interested, of course, to hear ideas. Just on a couple of the issues that were raised, material flows, I'm a bit of a nerd on these. I love Sankey diagrams and so on, and I would be very happy if we were able to use this kind of data for that. I don't think that we really want to be asking for full bills of materials with weights and everything in every product that's going in. So there'll be a limit to what we would have in terms of data, but I think it'd be fantastically important for local industrial industrial ecology and investment planning and symbiosis, and also very important in looking at our sort of open strategic autonomy in Europe post-pandemic, and you know where we have those dependencies on other parts of the world. Mentioning other parts of the world, the global side, of course, we're talking to OECD, UN bodies, WTO, and so on. Very aware that we need to address that, but basically, as I said, we're using our market. I mean, we're putting in place thresholds for being able to sell your product on the European market, whether you're producing it in Europe or not. So we're expecting non-European producers to have to abide by these requirements. There's a couple of questions in the chat about end of life of products and whether the data will continue. Well, obviously, once a product is no longer there, the identifier is not there. But of course, it will be useful data for recyclers and for end of life management in those identifiers. And also, we're looking at how to deal with things like the destruction of unsold goods in this context. And then Agnieszka was talking about the challenges that they have in terms of knowing about farmers and requirements and so on. And that is also held, as we can see, in terms of public authorities knowing how to invest in infrastructure in sustainable ways. And with the recovery and resilience plans, we saw how challenging it was for public authorities to know how to invest in rolling out 5G or electric vehicle charging stations or whatever in a circular way. And of course, it's not the environment ministries or the circular economy nerds who are preparing those investment plans. So we need really to be able to, with help of Vodafone and others, to actually help those public authorities to know what matters in terms of what is sustainable in the products and infrastructures as those are rolled out. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. What a great discussion this was, and I can see that also in the feedback we received. So sorry for everyone whose question we may not have been able to address here, but it really was great to see your comments and questions coming in. It showed that we certainly managed to create discussion here today. So great. I appreciate all the input we received from our speakers. And hopefully the discussion today helped our audience to understand where we are, and obviously very much looking forward to seeing where the Commission and where the EU will be taking this agenda forward. And we obviously are very happy that with our publication out, we hope that it also provides some input to the work that will be taking place in the near future. Thank you for Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications for all the support for the project and for collaborating with us on this journey. From the EPC perspective, we believe that there's so much more to be done. And I think that's kind of the final comments that we heard from William. I think that there's still a lot of awareness just to be created, also just about the rationale and understanding what circular economy is and how we can help to advance circular thinking in our economies, in our societies. So from the EPC perspective, we're certainly here and look forward to contributing to these discussions, and wherever we can look into the possibilities that digitalization can help in these efforts, we certainly are here as well. But thank you so much for our speakers. Thank you, audience, for your engagement for the discussion today, and we look forward to continuing these discussions. And wishing everyone a great afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.